Established 20 years ago, Scotland's Victim Notification Scheme entitles some victims of crime to receive certain information about the offender, such as the date they're going to be released from prison. Under proposed changes, a new victim contact team will be set up to give personalised support to victims based on their individual needs. They will automatically be referred to the team for a trauma-informed discussion about their options for registering for the scheme and for an explanation of their rights.
We want the victims to be at the firm heart of the victim notification scheme. It'll be easier to navigate. Once they're referred, after their experience, they'll be sat down, they'll be told exactly what's available to them, what information they can or don't want. So it's up to the individual. Some people don't want to get the information. So that is the unique point of the contact team, to give that personalised, trauma-informed service and to ensure that everything that the victim wants will be in place moving forward.
Well, after today's announcement, we got reaction from Kate Wallace, the Chief Executive of Victim Support Scotland. The Victim Notification Scheme has been in place for 20 years. What has its value been?
Well, where it's been really useful is telling victims when the prisoner in their case is being released from custody. So giving victims advance notice of that so that they can be prepared and not, experiencing trauma when they bump into somebody in the street that they haven't expected. So that has been its main value. It has other uses, but that's the main thing.
You have said it's not fit for purpose, though. I mean, what are the problems?
So at the moment, the Victim Notification Scheme, you only get asked once if you want to join that scheme, and you get asked at probably the most traumatised part of your experience. So very often victims can't remember if they've agreed to take part in the scheme or not. They often, there can be some years before someone's been released from prison and they don't remember if they're a member or not. You also only get notified in writing, usually through the mail. So if you've moved address, you're not going to remember to tell the Victim Notification Scheme people that you've moved, really. So there's a lot of issues like that, lots of problems, and it's not, one of my big arguments is for some people in very, very serious cases, it is a hugely traumatising thing to think about that the perpetrator in their case has been released from prison. It could be someone who's raped you, and getting a letter through the post without any warning to tell you that that person's been released from prison can be a hugely traumatising thing to happen to you. So putting support in around that so that you're being support, you're not just opening a letter with no one there to support you on your own without any idea about what the contents of that letter is. There's a whole big series of improvements that need to be made around that to make the process trauma-informed.
And so what changes are going to be taking place to address that problem that you've just talked about?
Well, one of the main ones is that the recommendation from the independent review around a victim contact team. So you will now automatically be contacted by a victim contact team to ask you whether or not you want to join the scheme. There was a lot of debate about whether because at the moment you've got to really opt into the scheme, whether that was appropriate or not. But this new victim contact team will be set up and they will support you through that conversation about whether you want to join and ask about contact preferences, that kind of thing, so that you can have a bit more choice and control in terms of how it is that you are actually notified if you want to sign up.
So that will make the whole process much easier for the victims. Is there anything you would have liked to have seen in the reforms that isn't going to go through? I mean, could it have gone further?
I suppose our issue is that the Victim Notification Scheme is hugely complex. I mean, the independent review itself took, over a year before it concluded. The government have taken 17 months before they've even responded to that review, and that's not because they've not been doing any work on it. It's because the scheme is so complex. It's taken them that length of time. I guess I'd hoped that they would be more about simplifying the scheme itself and making it easier to navigate, because it is hugely complex, involving a number of different bits of legislation. So that, for me, is a bit of a disappointment. The other, I suppose, issue that I think is the report says an in-house victim contact team. And I think I want to really make sure in this time of, you know, really challenging resource constraints, that we make best use of the people that we have in Scotland who are experienced in working with traumatised victims and supporting them. I do not want something else set up that's going to re-traumatise people even more than they already are. So I'm really keen that we work alongside government to support them in that contact team, because I think that's the role of the contact team will be really crucial going forward.
I mean, in general, how well do you think victims are supported in Scotland in our justice system?
The justice system in Scotland is not set up for victims at all. It is really complicated. It is geared up for the people who work in it. And you know, the whole language around it is so impenetrable and difficult for people to understand. There is little thought often given to victims and their experience of the system. And we know from victims that say to us and other organisations that they are traumatised enough by what's happened to them, but they often are even more traumatised again by the system and the way that it deals with them. And
do you think these changes then will go some way to addressing that? And do you think, you know, we're having more of a conversation about it now?
I'm really hoping so, and I'm hoping that we can get some changes in really quickly that help, because, you know, victims have been waiting for this for a number of years, and we've seen, you know, for example, the emergency early release programme during the summer for prisoners, that we used the old victim notification scheme, so we know that less than 2% of victims were actually notified. So there's a lot to be done in a short space of time.
Okay, we'll leave it there, but Kate Wallace, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.